as an extension to the main idea and primary purpose questions, and also as an extension to the organization of the passage type of question, we can take a look at another type of question which essentially falls under the same category of global comprehension. That is where the question asks you which of the following is the best suitable title for the passage that is given. The intent of this question is also to see whether you can come up with the appropriate answer in terms of the contents of the passage. So the objective of this question is also the same, but the objective of this question is more manifest in terms of the answer options that is given in such a way that the answer options are much more condensed. Like if you look at the primary purpose answer options or the main idea question answer options, the answer options are extended. Whereas if you see the title question answer options, the answer options are condensed. Now this means that whatever we want to say has to be said very, very succinctly in a manner that will reflect nothing but the central idea or the central theme of the passage. Now, keeping this in mind, since it still pertains to the global comprehension type of question, the objective also being the same, we would try to take a look at it with a difference in perspective only in terms of how to analyze the answer options that is given. Now, let's take a look at some of these sentences in a particular passage. Now, this particular passage that I have taken as an example is a 80-line passage, but I have just written, as you can see, just 2-3 sentences here. Again, from this particular passage, I have taken this first paragraph, or the first sentence that I have taken is derived only from the first sentence of the passage. The second sentence or the second paragraph is a reflection here. And the third sentence, or this is the first sentence of the third paragraph, followed by how it is concluded. Alright, now if you take a look at the passage begins with, every work of art is a child of its age. Every work of art is a child of its age. That means every work of art is representative of the infancy of its age, of that particular age. But, if you see, there is a but. That means there is a contradiction. Efforts to revive this particular art at best produces stillborn art. That means what? Efforts to revive any kind of art will at best, look at the wording, will at best produce stillborn art. At best, a negative word. Stillborn. Stillborn is dead. So obviously, efforts to revive is something that is going to be fraught with problems. It is something that is going to be full of errors, or it is some effort that is not going to produce the desired result. Alright, now let's look at the second paragraph. It says, there is, however, a contraster, another kind of external similarity, which means that in the first paragraph, the rest of the first paragraph, that is, there would be some kind of similarity. That means there is some kind of parallel situation that is established of art with something else. Now, since we do not have those lines, we do not know, but we'll see if that really matters, if our not knowing really matters in our answer. Third paragraph begins with, this all-important spark is now only a spark. This. What is this? This is a pronoun. So obviously, this is used instead of some idea that has been mentioned earlier. So obviously, this third paragraph is a continuation of the second paragraph. So what does the third paragraph first sentence say? This all-important spark is now only a spark. Merely a spark. So something that is not a resolution to a problem. It's only a spark. Something that is belittled here. For this reason, because it is only a spark, the primitive phase through which we are now passing can only be short. That means this primitive phase that we are looking at, or the primitive art that we are looking at, is short-lived. Alright, so basically what is the scope here? We are talking about art, we are talking about efforts to revive art, but those efforts to revive art will not or may not produce the desired result because it is a stillborn kind of thing. And then the last paragraph ends with saying it is now only a spark, which means it is belittling or it's not giving it appropriate importance. Now look at how the question is framed. It says, which of the following is the best title for the passage? I have not written the complete one, but which of the following is the best suitable title for the given passage? If you look at option A, remember what are we looking at? We are looking at art, we are looking at primitive, we are looking at problems. The art of early 20th century. Maybe art of early 20th century, but remember what I told you in the primary purpose type of question. This can be an overgeneralization, because how much can you discuss of art as such? Can you discuss the whole of early 20th century art? Maybe not. So this is very, very broad in its focus. Looks very attractive, but it is not at all something that can be considered as an answer, because you cannot in a short passage discuss the whole of early 20th century art. That can't be possible. Then, the dangers of materialism. We are only talking about art here. We are not talking about materialism. We are not, even if somewhere in the passage along the way there is a mention of material, there is a mention of materialism, it is possible that there is a mention of materialism somewhere along the passage, but that definitely cannot be the title of the passage. That cannot be the central theme of the passage, because if it were to be the central theme of the passage, that could have been mentioned here. So this also is very, very broad-based, so remove it. Third, obstacles to the revival of primitive art. We are talking about primitive art, we are talking about revival, we are talking about some kind of problems because of only we are talking about stillborn art. So maybe this could be considered as an answer, but let us see. Similarities in artistic movements. Where are we talking about an artistic movement at all? Yeah, somewhere along the way there could be a mention of a couple of artistic movements, but that cannot be again the central theme, because we are neither beginning with it nor concluding with it, neither is there any kind of example related to any kind of secondary art or artistic movement as such. And when we are talking about artistic movements as such, that opens up a whole new vista of art, and that cannot be summarized in terms of similarities of artistic movements, which implies that we should have more than one artistic movement that is mentioned, and there should be similarities that are established. If that were to be the case, then it would be evident somewhere in our first sentence and the last sentence of the paragraph that is given. Since that is not there, and artistic movement is too large a canvas for us to consider, we will eliminate this. Take a look at next one. Lack of purpose in art. Now this is like saying all politicians are corrupt. Now, whether it is a universal truth or not depends on a case-by-case analysis. So you say lack of purpose in art is kind of very, very generalized, over-generalized. So this cannot be an answer. Now you see how very, very generalized answers are used, or that method is used to create the incorrect answers. So if you focus on the content that is given here in terms of how to read the passage, then there is only one particular answer, that is obstacles to the revival of primitive art. Now this word obstacles or hindrances, that is not something that comes out anywhere in the lines that I have given you here, but then the individual words like at best, stillborn, only, these are words which tell us that there is a negativity running through. That negativity is come through in obstacles. So sometimes it is quite possible that we don't see, say for example, if it's an obstacle, we don't see an obstacle as such, but then the flow of the passage is going along that direction, and that should be sufficient for us to determine whether something is an answer or not. So the title or whatever is the best suitable title of the passage is totally dependent on the central idea, but this central idea is not mentioned in an expanded form, but it is mentioned in a condensed form. So the condensed form, that's the reason why we are looking at individual words to match. Now we are not saying that word match is possible, but most of the time terminology will be the same. When terminology is one and the same, there is no need to substitute it. Because, for example, in this, if you take, what can be a substitute for primitive art? Obviously nothing. So primitive art has to be written, that has to be part of your answer, because essentially that is what the passage is all about. So keeping all these things in mind, if you look at words, especially defining terms or terminology, if you look for those words also, sometimes you will be able to easily narrow down the scope of the answers. So I hope you have understood how the title of the passage works. Yet another type of question that you very often see on the reading comprehension section of the critical reading of SAT is the word meaning questions, or interpreting a couple of words or a phrase in the context of the passage that is given. Now, whether it is a phrase that you're interpreting, whether it's just a couple of words that you're interpreting, or whether it is one singular word that you're interpreting, interpretation should always revolve around your sentence in which it occurs. That means your interpretation should not be an overgeneralization. In other words, it should not be a summary of the entire passage. Now, they ask you for interpretation of individual words simply because they want to see if those words are understood in the context of the sentence in which they are presented, not in terms of the context of the entire passage as a whole. So we can very safely say that this type of question tests our knowledge of one singular point that is given in the passage. So for this type of question, there is no need to start reading the entire passage, but it would suffice if you take that particular line in which the word is supposed to be interpreted, take that particular sentence, and that entire sentence has to be summarized or interpreted, keeping in view the words that are in question. Now, if you take this particular sentence, now this sentence is derived from the passage. I have taken just one particular sentence here because the question is about interpreting the phrase vast knowledge. Despite the vast knowledge accumulated by scientists, and then it goes including equations for dash, and obvious mystery persists. So what is the feel that we get of this sentence? We are supposed to interpret vast knowledge, right? That vast knowledge in terms of a thought contraster that is presented, including equations for whatever, and obvious mystery persists. So there is knowledge, but this knowledge is in contrast with the mystery that is presented. So with this in mind, let's look at how to interpret it. Vast knowledge is used in order to. Vast knowledge in line whatever is used in order to. First one, emphasize the task of science teachers. Now, like I said, this particular interpretation of this word has to be in the context of this sentence only. Elsewhere in the passage, there could be a mention of science teachers, there could be a mention of scientists. But here, in this particular context, there is no mention of science teachers. So we need not, at this point of time, immediately imagine that it has something to do with science teachers. All right. So emphasize the task of science teachers. No task is mentioned, and there is nothing like science teachers. So very safely you can eliminate this from among the answers. Empathize with overburdened teachers. Again, even if I substitute this overburdened teachers with overburdened students, it still does not relate anywhere to our interpretation of this particular phrase, because in this sentence there is no such mention of teachers and students. So this also, and moreover, there's nothing like empathy. Statement of fact is given here, so there is nothing like empathy. Draw a contrast to an area of relative ignorance. Contrast is a word that can complement despite, and that the mystery continues. Contrast could be a word. So we will keep this for now. Praise the productivity of scientists. If the scientists were that productive, and if that were to be the objective of vast knowledge, then the sentence wouldn't conclude on the mystery persists. So obviously, a positive tone of the answer, you can remove that. Look at option E. acknowledge the difficulty of writing physics textbooks. That could be one of the factors, but then we are only interpreting vast knowledge. We are not interpreting the difficulty of writing physics textbooks as such. So this is also eliminated. So simply based on individual words, we can say draw a contrast is our answer, because contrast is with relation to the vast knowledge despite the vast knowledge. That means in spite of the vast knowledge, there is a problem, and that is the tone of vast knowledge. So vast knowledge is not mentioned only to say that there is too much of knowledge. Vast knowledge in the context of the sentence means that in spite of the vast knowledge, there is a problem. So therefore, contrast will suit us very nicely, and therefore option C is our answer. So whether we get individual words, whether we get phrases, whether we get part of the sentence to be interpreted, always remember that sentence is to be the focus. What goes before, what comes after is hardly ever required for a question of this kind. So it does not help if you are trying to summarize the whole passage like you did for the primary purpose or the central idea. It does not help if you try to do that and bring it here. If you do that, then obviously the entire purpose of the question is defeated. The purpose of the question, please remember, is to test your knowledge of individual words in the context of what is given, not in generality, and not in generality of the passage as such. We will take a few more examples to see how the phrases and words can be interpreted in our next session.